So next up, we have Dr. Mansour Fahimi, who's been providing statistical expertise and hands-on support for projects from design to delivery. He works on design and administration of complex surveys, as well as data enhancement methods, process optimization procedures, and program evaluation tasks. In recent years, he's been working on online data collection methods, where his research and publications have focused on improving the inferential integrity of data from compromised samples. He's presenting on rethinking response rate calculations for probability-based samples from online panels. Go ahead. Thank you, Mansour.
First of all, I wanted to thank Jill and the conference organizers for being so kind to reshuffle the presentations at the last minute to allow me to go and get my COVID vaccine. So I'm happy to announce that now I am vaccinated and dangerous. So thank you for that flexibility. All right. So I hope that this presentation is going to be fairly trivial. And so we are talking about how do we go about computing response rates for probability-based samples that are selected from online panels. I should mention that this work has benefited significantly from the contributions of my ex-colleague, Francis Barlas, who presented this morning. So quickly, I like to start with what I call a big picture so that we have a frame to talk about or to contrast against. Then I talk about various panels, online panels. Then I state the nature of the problem. I will then go to what I would call my solution, and then back that up, hopefully with some empirical justifications, and then on to conclusions. So the big picture is that surveys need to be designed and implemented with focus on total survey error. And total survey error has many possible nodes. Errors that come in from improper observation or lack of observation, errors that coming from processing, and errors that coming from reporting. And if you peel the onion more, you're going to see that when we talk about errors of non-observation, we could have sampling frame coverage issues, sampling methodology inefficiencies. On the observation side, there are questionnaire design issues, data collection issues. Errors of processing deal typically with data compilation, imputation, weighting, and then ultimately errors of reporting has to do with analytics, interpretation, and conclusion. So all these nodes provide a chance for something to go wrong, and therefore it is important for us to have a holistic attitude about surveys and make sure that we don't focus only on one node that is area of our comfort and interest. So online panels, I like to make an immediate distinction between two types of online panels. There is a small number of panels out there, which I like to say they have organic representation. These are panels that use probability-based methods for recruitment. And in contrast, we have dozens, if not hundreds of other opt-in panels that can at best produce what I like to call synthetic representation through coda sampling and other creative methods. Opt-in panels have unknown coverage problems for various reasons, most importantly because they are compiled using only convenient methods. They have all sorts of systematic exclusions, such as non-internet households, those who are less acculturated, and they are significantly more prone to fraudulent respondents. The focus of this conversation, this presentation, is on online panels that have organic representation, meaning those that rely on probability-based methods for recruitment. So what is the huge deal about response rates? If you go through the literature, you're gonna see all sorts of conclusions. So there are folk who say that non-response accounts for just a small component of total error. I can't argue with that. Then there are those who say that response rates have actually a limited power for predicting bias. I can't argue with that. And my favorite is Mike Brick's conclusion that without a solid theoretical basis, we are really left to speculate whether spending all the money to improve response rate can actually reduce bias. But then again, when it comes to traditional survey researchers or organizations such as the OMB, they are still on the 1960s frequency and consider surveys that have low response rate not able to provide quality data. As far as I'm concerned, for probability-based samples, response rates can be used as a way of quantifying the extent to which respondents of a survey represent their target population. So this presentation is from that perspective, representativity. So what is the problem? The problem is that the current APOR method for calculating response rates is incorrect. And I have made it my mission to take any opportunity to expose the fallacy of that method. Let me try and explain that to you. So how do we go about compiling panels? There is a universe, and then you take a sample from that universe to recruit. And the hole that I am showing in the recruited Venn diagram is supposed to represent the non-response that you encounter during the recruitment. So there is some misrepresentation or underrepresentation that happens as part of the recruitment, and that's perfectly understandable. And then most panels, once they recruit people, they go through a process of profiling so that they can gather information about their panel members before they make them active and use them for panel. And that's another step where you're going to encounter additional non-response. And then on top of that, if you go ahead and take a simple random sample, giving everybody the same opportunity of selection, obviously you're going to retain the underrepresentation that you have in your impaneled panel members. And then when you go to conduct a survey with that sample, there is a third component of non-response, which is survey completion non-response. And this academic textbook scenario is what the current APOR methodology, thanks to Charles DiSogra and Maria Calogaro, is based on. So they suggest that we use a cumulative response rate that reflects the non-response that was encountered from recruitment, the non-response that was encountered during empanelment, and the non-response that is going to be encountered when we actually conduct the survey. Okay, this makes perfect sense, but none of the professional serious panels follow this academic and textbook scenario. Let me explain what I mean by that. So in reality, again, you have a universe, you recruit from that universe. Obviously, you're going to encounter non-response at the recruitment level. I'm not denying that. And then when you go through your empanelment, you're still going to encounter additional non-response. I'm not denying that. But this is not where most panels stop. They actually go through ongoing replenishment in the hopes of minimizing the underrepresentation that the impaneled members have encountered. The methodology that APOR has adopted ignores that. And on top of that, when you select a sample, if you do not select the sample in a simple random fashion, and instead use some kind of weighted methodology, probability proportional to size, for example, that would ameliorate some of the imbalances that you have in your replenished panel, then you are back into an EPSIM, representative sample, and it is under this scenario, this realistic scenario, where when you conduct a survey, the only non-response that you have to be penalized for is what you encounter during the survey administration. Put differently, the cumulative response rate, which is incorrect, will be reduced to response rate which is only going to be a function of the non-response that you encounter during the survey administration. Well, the above doesn't happen for all panels. Certain conditions have to be met before that conclusion can be made. First of all, the online panel needs to have no systematic exclusion. And for that to happen, you need to have probability-based panel for the initial recruitment, and all the subsequent and ongoing replenishments need to be using probability-based sampling as well. Detailed geodemographic information need to be available on all panel members, and these are going to be obtained based on profile data that are obtained from panel members that can be used to construct weights that make the panel members representative in spite of the attrition that the panel is encountering. And more importantly, study samples need to be selected not using simple random sampling, because simple random sampling retains the imbalances of the panel. Instead, probability proportional to sampling needs to be used where size measures correct for the minor imbalances that the panel can carry. And the other thing is that the panel needs to be large enough to provide the so-called elbow room for PPS sampling, because PPS sampling is pretty demanding. And then I claim that knowledge panel, although I have no direct affiliation with knowledge panel at this point, I used to work for GFK and Ipsos, but I am now with Marketing Systems Group. So this is not trying to put a plug for KP, but KP is the only online panel satisfying all of the above conditions. So this is a lot of many claims. Let me share with you some empirical justification for what I just mentioned. So again, knowledge panel is a panel that has over 60,000 active members. There are detailed profiles, dozens and dozens of information available about each panel member. For this particular research, we took the existing panel and weighted to the detailed geodemographic characteristics of adults and used those weights as measure of size for PPS sampling. 3 samples were selected, one of size 1,000, another 2,500, and then another one 5,000. And then we made comparisons with respect to the geodemographic and other characteristics of the sample, not respondents. I'm talking about the sample against the benchmarks. So this is going to be a table that I'm going to repeat with respect to various characteristics. So I want to make sure everybody is comfortable with this display. Sample 1, comprised of 1,000 individuals, had 491 males in it, 509 females in it. Sample 2, comprised of 2,500, had pretty much the same distribution for gender. Sample 3, 5,000, again, the same type of distribution. And we are making these sample comparisons against the benchmark, which is coming from the CPS. And as you see, with respect to gender, the sample is very much aligned. So and again,
we've run out of time for this. We have a little extra, but if you could wrap up pretty quickly.
Okay, I will be happy to share the slides, but I just wanted to go ahead and show to you that the balancing that I am showing here is with respect to a whole bunch of characteristics, race, ethnicity, income, region of the country, and even with respect to some variables that were not controlled for during the sample selection process, such as home ownership, US born or not, party ID, veteran status, marital status, whether they smoke, whether they have diabetes, whether they have hepatitis. So conclusion is that when an online panel has no systematic exclusion, when the detailed geographic profile data are available from all panel members, when the panel is large enough to provide PPS sampling, the elbow room that it needs, then survey response rate for probability-based samples from online panels should be simply the number of eligible respondents divided by the eligible assignees. simple, no, inferential gymnastics. And then, so to wrap it up, the current APOR methodology for response rate calculation is applicable only under textbook scenarios when the panel in question is static. What do I mean by that? The panel has only a one-time recruitment, no replenishment. Samples are selected in a simple random fashion that retain the panel imbalances, but in reality, none of the professional panels today use the above protocol. They rely on continuous replenishment to ameliorate the attrition of the panel, and none of them use simple random sampling for sample selection. Anyhow, so again, I'm trying to take advantage of any opportunity I get to expose this fallacy of the APOR, because under the current methodology, most of these surveys have to report cumulative response rates that are in 1 or 2%, which is really, really unfair. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I feel like I have a million questions, Mansour, but I'm not sure that I can formulate them right now. One question I had for you, and you may have answered this because I had some distractions going on for a little bit, but about the replenishment sample, I mean, in your first diagram that you had, where you were showing us where you diverge from the typical diagram, the replenishment sample itself has these same issues, doesn't it? I mean, we still have the non-coverage, you still have the non-response. So I'm curious about how that works to take us completely out of the sample calculation there.
Right, that's an excellent question. As you see in the depiction that I have, I'm not claiming that the replenishment is going to completely take away the under coverage that we have encountered during the in-panel. Most of these replenishment samples are selected in a way, they are selected with an eye towards what are the misalignments of the panel. So for example, we know that younger males attrit at a higher rate. Therefore, if your replenishment oversamples younger males, then you're going to reduce the imbalance that you have. If you know that minorities are going to have higher attrition rates, and therefore in your replenishment, you're going to oversample them. Again, we are not claiming that you can completely make your impaneled or replenished panel fully representative. That's where the PPS sampling comes into play with the targeted replenishment and a weighted sample selection, a PPS methodology. That's where all this argument holds together.
Okay, I think I have more questions, but I'll save them for later. So Ari's asking, if you say that KP is the only panel satisfying your conditions, where is it that other panels fail the condition? And I was also asking something similar. You said only large panels, and that may be part of what you're saying, but how large is, large enough?
Right, another excellent question. Again, I'm not here to promote KP as much as I admire KP. I have been involved with it for almost a decade, so I know it inside and out, but that's not my mission here. So there are basically two large panels in the US. Let's be adults about it. One is KP and the other one is Amerispeak. Amerispeak is perhaps size-wise similar to KP. Perhaps it's using similarly rigorous methodology for recruitment and all that. So I'm putting all that aside. The reason why I say KP is the only panel that satisfies all of the above conditions is because KP is the only panel that uses a patented PPS methodology for sample selection. No other panel in the US, or as far as I know in the world, uses that methodology, which is a very clever, unfortunately, I can't claim credit for it. Somebody else developed that methodology, but it's a very clever solution for removing some of the imbalances that are left in the panel even after replenishment. So KP, from that perspective, is the only panel that qualifies for what I'm talking about here.
Okay, your sound is kind of going in and out a little bit. I don't know if maybe you can get a little closer. We have another question. Let's see. Oh, scrolled off the screen here, sorry. If the full panel receives an invitation to a survey and there's no SRS nor PPS, can you still use the response rate of completes over eligibles?
No, that's another excellent question. And with most KP surveys, we never use, or they never use, the entire panel. If you use the entire panel, then you're going to retain all the imbalances that the panel has. So what I'm explaining here is the typical situation where you select a PPS sample from KP, not the entire panel.
Okay, and maybe time for one more. In reality, you don't often have the information on the frames to target the replenishment samples to those you underachieve on in the recruited sample. Otherwise, you would use it for the recruitment stage. So your conditions are not realistic in many cases, are they? Also, what about the unobserved variables?
Let me address the first question. Respectfully, I disagree with that argument. KP relies on address-based sampling, and those who are familiar with ADS know that the delivery sequence file from the Postal Service can receive a ton of ancillary data that would help with targeting. And if I can put a plug for my current company, Marketing Systems Group is the leading organization that taps into very expensive and very large commercial databases to add on a whole bunch of information to each address that would enable targeting. And regarding the second question, you're right. There are unobservable, unmeasurable imbalances that remain a challenge. I'm not claiming that this methodology will deal with all that, but then let's be honest about it. When we weight the data and claim that the results of the weighted data are unbiased, we don't wait to unobservable measures, we wait to basic geodemographics. So the same criticism stays there too, and therefore that remains a challenge.
All right, so we're out of time. I think that we may have a few minutes left in the entire session. If anybody has thought of any other questions for any of the other panelists or has any follow-ups, we could probably take another one. I thank you all very much. This was our last panel of the day, and it's wonderful that you're all still here. And I have to say, for this one, I really loved the bias versus efficiency unicorn in Andrew Ward's presentation. And I think that there's some really interesting things here to think about. So thank you all very much. And I'll turn it back over to Tara.
Thank you, Jill. Actually, I'm going to hand it to Ari to wrap up for the day. As a reminder, we begin at the same time again tomorrow. So Ari?
Thanks, Tara. It's just to thank everyone for excellent presentations and for everyone who contributed to the discussion, and thanking everyone who stayed with us for the whole day. My real regret is that I couldn't propose that we now continue discussion over drink and then maybe over dinner in some nice place in Washington, DC. So we'll have to take a rain check of that for next year. So, but as Tara said, there's another day tomorrow, so hope to see you all again there. Thank you very much.